Now, Police and Prisons Trade Union Popcru has welcomed the cancellation of the contract between government and international private security company G4S over the Mangaung Correctional Centre. The contract, which cost the government at least R1 billion a year, was set to run up until 2026. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola says the decision was taken after consultation with legal advisors. Now, these developments follow the dramatic escape of convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester with the alleged assistance of employees at the maximum security prison last year.
Some may recall that on the 28th of April 2023, the department did indicate that it had referred to the contract that we have with Bloemfontein Correctional Services for a legal opinion. This was when we were still seized with the Bester escape matter, but we did indicate that there were also other matters that to the department were not comfortable with, and we felt that they needed a very sharp legal eye so that it could assist us in terms of how to proceed with this particular contract. We have thus received that legal opinion. Hence, today we then served the Bloemfontein Correctional Services with a notice for termination.
Now, in following up on that story, Chad Thomas of IRS Forensic Investigations joins us now for more. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Now, after we were initially told that the contract was set to expire in 2026, the Department of Correctional Services has finally decided to terminate its relations with G4S. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's too little too late. The fact that it took a case like Thabo Bester to act as a catalyst for change shows the condition that our prison services are currently in. We've got 150,000 prisoners in public prisons and 6,000 prisoners in private prisons. They cost us an absolute fortune. In public prisons, a study in 2021 came with a figure of around about 11,000 Rand per prisoner per month, whereas in private prisons in 22 around the same period was about 15,000 Rand per prisoner per month. The conditions in Mangaung, one would have expected to have been far better and far better managed. South Africans have this perception that anything that is run by government is run poorly. We seem to hold the private sector to a higher standard. Yet there was a report in 2019, a documentary was made called Prison for Profit based on the Misery Merchants by Ruth Hopkins, which studied that particular prison in Mangaung and showed gross human rights atrocities. It showed how the warders were underpaid. It showed massive problems there. In 2022, a article was released in IOL. I think it was authored by Newzroom Afrika, and it was all about the fact that the contracts with South Africa's private prisons have been negotiated in bad faith all the way back in 98, 99, 2000. Went on to say that 3 of the people that had negotiated on behalf of correctional services, as soon as those deals were signed and sealed, they went on to work for those very companies that they'd been negotiating with. So there's been speak about the conditions of these prisons and the way in which they've been run and the conditions of private compared to public for some time, and it took the Thabo Bester saga to draw the entire people of our country's attention to these deplorable conditions and the fact that sometimes something run by the private sector isn't necessarily better than something run by the public sector.
So, yes, we'll catch on to that discussion and expand a little bit more because unions like SAFTU had also weighed in on it. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about what's happened so far. The investigating team in this case says it cannot rule out the possibility of additional arrests. What does this now entire case demonstrate about the inner workings of the Correctional Services Department?
I heard a frightening statistic today. I saw an interview with Ian Cameron, and he said that the minister reported back that in the last financial year, something like 37,000 cell phones had been confiscated from prisoners in our various prisons across South Africa, yet only 24 warders faced disciplinary action. That is a huge figure. It's a bizarre figure. It's an unbelievable figure when one hears about 37,000 phones, which is regarded as contraband in that particular environment. We've heard about prison syndicates operating behind prison walls. We saw that Thabo Bester himself was running a fraudulent scheme from behind prison walls. It shows us that the current situation is deplorable. We have a situation of overcrowding. We have a situation with too few warders per prisoner in this country. And as a result thereof, it appears for all intents and purposes that the prisons are being run by the prisoners themselves rather than the prison warders.
So, unions such as SAFTU have said that this entire Thabo Bester saga shows that privately operated prisons are not in any way beneficial to society. They said things like, it's perhaps a myth that privately run institutions are efficient, competent, cost-effective, and so forth for the government. And, of course, we've seen the monthly bill as to how much government is actually paying in comparison to the outcome of the service.
Certain industries are run better by the private sector, and certain industries, the private sector complements the public sector. We see that in the private security industry in respect of force multipliers on the ground, where security companies are assisting SAPs in the prevention or the reaction to crime. But certain organizations should not be run by the private sector. When one looks at the prison system in America and one sees how it's been abused over the years so that they could feed these prisons with convicts to keep this machine going, capitalism doesn't work within the prison environment. It's a project that should be run by government, because it's a project that's people needing rehabilitation, people that need to be kept away from the rest of society for a specific period of time, and it shouldn't be for profit. And for me, when one sees that a study was done called exactly that, prison for profit, and you hear about the paper being entitled The Misery Merchants, South Africa is a microcosm of a bigger problem worldwide with the privatization of prisons. And for me, it is not the type of industry that can be run effectively, especially in the South African context, by the private sector.
And more than anything, I suppose what the country is essentially looking for is accountability, because everything about the fire, the body of Katlego Bereng found in Thabo Bester's cell indicates that this was a very well orchestrated escape plan. What will it take, do you think, in your opinion, to find solutions and clean up the entire Correctional Services Department?
One good thing has come out of this whole Thabo Bester saga is the fact that our prisons are being reevaluated. It's now very squarely in the public domain. Everybody's looking at it, and government has reacted accordingly. We've seen multiple arrests. We're now seeing that the contract has been cancelled, 90 days notice has been given. This is what we want to see happening. We also need to understand what's going to happen in the future. Government needs to be far more transparent with us. The reason our prisons are overcrowded isn't just because of convicted criminals serving custodial sentences, but also because of the overcrowding in awaiting trial. We have to relook the bail system. We have to relook that the people sitting in awaiting trial may have met bail conditions but may not have been able to afford that particular bail. So the entire prison system in South Africa needs to be looked at and overhauled so that we can prevent something from this happening again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Chad Thomas, IRS Forensic Investigations.